Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. People experiencing homelessness may qualify for an economic impact payment. COVID tax tip 2020-132 October 6, 2020. People experiencing homelessness may qualify for a $1,200 economic impact payment and $500 for each qualifying child under age 17. To get this payment, they must register with the IRS by Saturday, November 21st, 2020. So the IRS has pushed out this deadline again for the filing requirement if someone has not received, so this is going to be the qualification. Someone has not yet received an economic impact payment. Typically, they're not required to file because their income is below a certain threshold. So if you haven't filed a 2018 or 2019 tax return, you may not have received an economic impact payment. But if you're required to file a tax return because your income is above the threshold to do so, then this isn't for you. You should file, they want you to file the tax return. If you're below that threshold, then you may not have gotten the economic impact payment, or you may have, even though you have not filed yet. If you have not filed yet and you got some payment from some other type of government organization like Social Security, then the IRS may have been able to pick up enough information to process the economic impact payment. But for those whose income are below the threshold and they don't have any other access to any other benefits, then those are the people that the IRS has been looking to reach out to, and they've been continually extending the deadline to try to reach more individuals in this circumstance. And after the deadline, if you don't file by the deadline using this kind of easier tool, if you know anybody in this situation, if they don't file before that point, then they would need to file an actual tax return for 2020 in 2021 in order to receive the economic impact payment, which would be a problem because they don't typically file a tax return due to the fact their income is going to be below the threshold for them to need to file a tax return. So it would be easier to file with this non-filer tool, and so that's what the IRS is trying to do. So they keep on pushing out this deadline. So they're telling us this time, this is it. This is for serious. They're not going to push it out past November 21st. This is as far as they're going to go, unless they push it out again, because they said that before. But this time it's for serious now. They're going to November 21st. But so in any case, it would be easier for anybody in that situation to use the tool. So if you know anyone that's in that situation and would benefit from using it, then you want to do it. You want to look into it before November 21st. Don't count on them pushing the deadline out, although you never know. They may push it out because they keep pushing it out, but I wouldn't depend on it. So November 21st. So if someone's income is below $12,200 or $24,400, if they're married, they probably don't file a tax return. Why? Because if you're under those thresholds, you may not be required to file a tax return. Although, again, if you're under those thresholds, that doesn't mean you don't want to file a tax return, because if you had any earned income and any withholdings on it, then you're probably going to get a refund of those withholdings. And if you qualify for an earned income credit or child tax credit, those are refundable credits where you could get money back beyond the amount of payments that you have made. So again, if you're below those thresholds, that doesn't mean that you necessarily don't want to file, because you may have a substantial benefit to do so, especially with the earned income credit and possibly a child tax credit. But people that have not filed that are below that threshold, if you're below that threshold, you may want to file, but you're not required to file. And people that have not filed and are below that threshold, then are the ones that the IRS is reaching out to. So that means the IRS may not have enough information to issue their payment. To get an economic impact payment this year, these individuals need to register by November 21st. They do this by using the Free Filers Interpayment Info tool. There's a link to that tool here. There'll be a link to this in the description. It's available in English and Spanish. People who don't normally file a tax return may be eligible for an EIP, economic impact payment, if they are a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or qualifying resident alien. You can go to the link here for the qualified resident alien, more information on it. Have a work-eligible Social Security number, cannot be claimed as a dependent of another taxpayer. So if you can be claimed, that last one, note that there's a lot of discussion on that one. If you cannot be claimed, if you're claimed as a dependent by somebody else, then you're not going to be able to get the economic impact payment. And then you might say, well, isn't there a benefit to the person who claimed me as a dependent in that case, the person who claimed me as the dependent on their tax return? Well, if you're a qualifying child, one of the qualifications being under the age of 17, then they get a $500 increase to the economic impact payment. But if you're over 17 and can still be claimed as a dependent, then you don't get anything, right? On either side, the person claiming the dependent typically won't get any benefit, and the person who's claimed as a dependent won't get any benefit in that case. So there's been kind of questions about that particular situation there. So back to the text. To use the tool, persons need name as it appears on the Social Security card for self and spouse if they are eligible. So obviously you need the name to tie into the Social Security number. Remember that the IRS sees you as a Social Security number, so the name has to match what they see you as, which is the number, the Social Security number. And of course, if married, the spouse's name as well. A work-eligible SSN, Social Security number, for self and spouse if they are eligible. So they're going to need the number that the IRS sees you as, which is, of course, the Social Security number, which needs to tie out to the name that they have on file for that number. For each qualifying child, name, relationship, and Social Security number or adoption tax identification number. So any qualifying child, one of the main requirements is basically under the age of 17 who has a Social Security number, or you have an adoption tax identification number. That could be necessary in order to get the added $500 payment for the qualifying child. An email address to help create an account to the non-filer tool. So you will need an email address. There's a lot of free, email options that you can use, like a Gmail account or something like that, to make sure that you have an address so that you can use the tool properly, because it's an online tool to be using. A mailing address where they can receive a payment and confirmation letter, which the IRS will mail within 15 days after issuing their payment. So obviously, if someone's homeless, that could be a problem as well. But the IRS is going to need a payment format, which would either be banking information if possible, and they used to have that available on the tool, but may not after the prior deadline. But so they'll need a mailing address where the payment can be sent to, and then banking information, including routing and account numbers if they want their payment via direct deposit. So if you have a banking information, they've been pushing to try to do the banking information, and then you get the direct deposit. That would be faster to do that. An identity protection personal identification number if the IRS sent one in the past. So if the IRS sent an identity protection personal identification number, then you want that. If a person lost it, they can use the Get an IP PIN. There's a link to the Get an IP PIN here tool on irs.gov to retrieve the number. The non-filer tool asks for a user's license or state ID number to digitally sign the document. There are other ways to do this, so an ID is optional in the tool. If someone wants their payment by direct deposit but doesn't have a bank account, they can visit the FDIC website. There's a link there for help. So there's a link to the FDIC website for help there. The IRS will mail a payment to anyone who doesn't give direct deposit information. Other key points about economic impact payment. The IRS highly recommends the online non-filer tool. There's a link to that here for the fastest economic impact payment. So again, they want you to give you if you haven't got one yet and you fall into this category, then they're looking for you to use this non-filer tool. That's the fastest way to do it. If you don't do it that way, then you would have to actually wait to file the tax return for 2020 and 2021. And again, that would be a longer process to do, especially for people who don't normally need to file a tax return. So people who can't access or use the tool should follow the steps in the non-filer tool section of the Economic Impact Payment FAQs, frequently asked questions. They should submit their information to the IRS by November 21st. If someone misses the November 21st deadline, they can claim the payment as a credit on a 2020 federal income tax return next year. So note, again, this credit is tied actually to 2020 tax return that'll be filed if you needed to file it in 2021. So the option has always been that they're going to kind of estimate the tax based on prior information and this tool, but then it'll actually be tied to the 2020 tax return. So if you pass the deadline and the IRS doesn't extend it, which I mean this is it, they're not going to do it this time. This is like the last time. They're not going to. But in any case, if you pass it, then you'd have to file the tax return, which again would be more burdensome to do, and it would take longer to do, especially for people who do not generally file a tax return. So the payment is not taxable income. and getting one does not affect eligibility for other benefits such as supplemental nutrition assistance program, unemployment benefits, or other benefit programs. Obviously, many benefit programs are dependent on having an income threshold under a certain level. So having, income could actually be bad in that situation. So this economic impact payment should not have a negative effect for qualification in these other kind of benefit programs. So that hopefully that's not a worry. So there should not be an impact on those things. So in any case, people can use the Get My Payment tool. There's a link to the Get My Payment tool here at irs.gov within 2 weeks to check their payment status. So once you file for the payment using the Get My Payment, you can use the Get My Payment tool then to check and see if the payment is indeed being processed and is indeed being sent out. For more information, you have the Economic Impact Payment Eligibility FAQs, frequently asked questions. There's a link to them here. There'll be a link to this in the description.